Basil, we have a new agent in our office as of yesterday.
How are we doing?
Welcome.
Yes.
So let's go to the let's go to our emails and we'll look at some emails that have come in. Go down to 19. Okay, so the 20th. Okay, no, the next, the previous one. Okay, so this is the message the agent sent to me. Should I take out $1 million list and the client is chased to me after seeing my online advertising, but it's listed right now. So that's that message that she sent to me. And then the next message, click there. This is, no, wrong one, that one. I told her to end her current relationship, then we can properly chat. Is that the correct thing to do?
No.
No.
Why is it not?
Inducing a breach of
You
contract.
cannot ask people to terminate.
Right, so you can't tell the person to end their relationship. You have to say, you have your property listed right now with another agent, call me when your property is, you're no longer under contract with that agent type thing. But you can't tell them to end the relationship. You can go to their house if they invite you there, but you can't tell them to end the relationship, right? So very important. Okay. What's this one about? Revised Form B. Okay, so we're gonna talk about that in a, so you can skip that one. Council 72nd Avenue. What's that about? No attachment there. So I've forgotten what that one's about. So go skip that one. Okay, that's coming later. Canceling a listing. So you all should know about canceling listing. So, because there's confusion in our office regarding how to cancel listing. So there's two ways to cancel listing. Unconditional release and cancellation of multiple listing. When you do the cancellation of multiple listing, the person can't sell the property or list it for 60 days or the expiry date of their current contract, whichever comes first. Right? Does everyone follow that?
Mhm.
So the issue is that some people incorrectly do the wrong form when they relist a property. Because if you relist a property, so like your property's listed for the last 3 months, hasn't sold, you say, well, let's make it a new listing. So you cancel it, make a new listing. If you do the 60-day cancellation thing, then the real estate board has to manually release that listing so we can list it again. And it's just a big hassle. And agents are sometimes wondering, they're frustrated because it's not on the MLS system right away. Well, because we have no control until the real estate board processes the manual release. So the correct thing to do when you want to cancel and relist is to do an unconditional release. So in other words, have the customer sign a new listing. Once they sign the new listing, have them sign the unconditional release so you don't risk losing your commission. And then you send both to the real estate board, and then we don't have to wait sometimes over a day for the real estate board to process that release. Because we've had a few agents who send us the 60-day cancellation and a relist. So then we send it to the real estate board sometime that day or the next morning. It gets canceled so we can list it. And in the meantime, they're frustrated the property's not on MLS. See? So make sure that you do the correct, if you're going to relist, unconditional release, then new listing.
What if you change the date of the listing? Like it gets expired?
Well, then that's totally different than expires. But that's what's the problem with having an expired listing?
Another agent.
Yeah, that seller will get letters for the next 6 months, six years.
They do?
Yeah, next 6 years they'll get letters. So, hi April. Keaton will have you talk about mortgages in a few minutes.
Sure.
So just remember that. First page of the offer accepted. Okay, so no, that's the top thing there. So I got an accepted offer, and the agent wanted, I was the buyer's agent, they were the seller's agent. They wanted the instructions page with my client's initials. So my question is, you know what I'm talking about? The
Front page?
front page of the contract. Does the seller's agent need the buyer's initials on the information page?
Not really, they need to have their own
Right.
initials,
It's
that's
not
all.
part of the contract, it's information.
Yeah, so there's no, the seller's agent does not need the buyer's initials on the front page, right? What is the whole thinking behind having the front page initialed?
Make sure they.
Buyer knows
cost.
information.
Right, because it's a career rule that you have to disclose costs to your client. So if you're using the office commission disclosure, then if you're using the office commission disclosure, then the commission's already disclosed on that form. So you don't have to do the front page initials. But if you're not using the office commission disclosure, you're using something else, then you have to somehow tell the cost to the buyer. And the easiest way to do that is to have them initial the front page. But the seller's agent does not need that, only you need that, right? Our office doesn't even care if, we don't need to require that, but you need it in case there's a problem, right? Okay, what is this about? Oh, that's the one, we already dealt with that one, so you can close that off. Okay, so it's a buyer's agent contract. No, we don't need to see that. Local improvement levies. So do you remember on this, on the PDS, there's a question about local improvement levies? Does everyone know what I'm talking about? Is there somebody who doesn't?
Say it again,
City
please.
levies.
Do you know what I'm talking about, Parisa? The local improvement levies on the PDS?
Yeah, the, whatever the city might put on the, as a,
You know what I'm talking about, Mary? No? So go to the go to the PDS, either residential or commercial, strata, doesn't matter. So there's a question that most people think this deals with the strata, but it's not a strata question. There it is. E. Are you ever any current or pending local improvement levies?
Yes.
So what is that about? That is typically in Vancouver, it is for lane paving. So all the owners on the street can get together, sign a little petition, take it to the city, say, please pave our back lane. They charge everybody $50 a year for the next 20 years, and the lane is paved. That's a local improvement levy. You can also do it for trees on the street, sidewalks in Burnaby, all kinds of things like that. So that's what that is. Nothing to do with strata. It's a local improvement levies, and it can be for a condo or a residential unit, right? But many agents think that has something to do with stratas charging everyone to fix the roof of the building. But it's in the city of Vancouver. Okay, this is the big one. So we'll talk about this one after Keaton gives a little update on mortgages and this type of thing. What would you like to say?
So, as you all know, there's been lots of rule changes lately, and I've talked about that a few times. Something that's relevant, that's likely coming up right now, is the Bank of Canada is looking at increasing the qualifying rate again, which means that your clients are going to qualify for less. It's a simple answer. We can pre-approve them and send in an actual pre-approval to a lender and get that grandfathered for 120 days. Changes are expected, if they're going to happen, probably sometime next week. So it's a tool we can use, and it's a good way to motivate your buyers. On top of that, different lenders have different rules. So if you have a buyer that's just barely missing out what they want, let's say that they're looking for a 2-bed condo and 600,000 is kind of the bottom mark in where they're looking. Sometimes we can use a different lender who's going to have different guidelines, and we can maybe increase their max to 650 or 675. So if you have a client that's just working with one relationship, it can be a little difficult sometimes because they just get frustrated, they can't buy what they want. They look at you as the realtor and say, get me a better deal. Well, we know it doesn't always work that way. So sometimes we can look at using other banks or credit unions to get them qualified for more. But more importantly, we're able to send in your clients for a quick pre-approval right now if we get all the paperwork from them, which means they can grandfather the rules, and we all have a way to motivate them to act quickly, otherwise they're going to qualify for less.
And when are they taking in effect?
It's one of those things that we start to suspect is going to happen. We're starting to have lenders letting us know that they think it's going to happen as well, but there's no set date. It's not like increasing the overnight lending rate. There's no meetings. It's just they're going to announce it on a Thursday and say, oh, new qualifying rate is 5.34, whatever they decide it is.
No notice.
So that's why you need to get your buyers pre-qualified right now so they get that old rate. It'll make your deals much together. So that's a good reason for buyers to get pre-approved, right? Okay, so this is a question. So that's it for you? You're done?
I'll hang up.
Yeah, okay, good. Okay, so we want to talk, maybe before I go into this, let's do a little chart to talk about your role as an agent. And so, because I see this confusion a lot with agents regarding what they want to do. I spent 20 minutes of my life 2 days ago talking about carpet cleaning this place, right? And it was a very frustrating experience for me because of all that the agent did. So let's talk about your role as an agent. Some things you're responsible for and some things that you're not responsible for. So tell me things that you as an agent are responsible for and things you're not responsible for that some agents think that you are. What's something?
Not responsible?
Yeah.
Legal advice?
Legal advice, okay? So, because some agents like to give legal advice to their clients about different things, right? What would be an example of types of legal advice agents are tempted to give but shouldn't?
The terms of the contract, the clauses, interpretation of the.
You know the answer I'd like to hear?
Sorry?
Whether GST is applicable or not?
Oh, yeah.
Whether they're exempt for property transfer tax? Whether the home qualifies for the empty home tax thing? Right? So those are things that you as a realtor have to avoid that temptation to tell
It's
people.
the other way around. We are not responsible for legal advice.
Yeah, so just put the word not in front of that, yeah, or you cut and paste it. So yeah, so avoid that temptation to tell your clients whether GST is applicable, whether property transfer tax, if they're exempt from it, whether the empty home tax is there. Another one is, yes, you can build a garage here, yes, you can put laminate floors in this condo, right? Because a building could have a rule, no laminate floors. So you tell the buyer, yes, you can barbecue, yes, you can put laminate floors in, yes, you can have your pit bull, all those things, right?
Or we
But
can take this wall off.
you can take this wall out, it's not a load bearing wall. Yeah, it's not load bearing, take it out, right? You're not expert in that, so that's the risk. What's another one?
So we are not responsible to tell them about transfer tax?
No, whether it applies to them or not. Like some people are first-time buyers, it could be exempt from the property transfer tax. So I'm saying don't tell the buyer, yes, you're exempt,
Oh.
because it's too risky, because they might not be exempt.
Because if their husband 25 years ago owned a property and they lived in it, they don't qualify.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah, one of them, but the other part still qualifies.
Both, if you or a spouse live in a home as your primary residence, it applies to you as well.
Yeah.
So,
If you buy it as joint tenants, which almost all spouses do. If you buy it as tenants in common, they likely wouldn't, then it would be. Okay, what else would you not be responsible for, or what something you are responsible for? Let's do some things that you're responsible for. What when a person hires you to either buy a property or sell a property, what are some things that you are responsible for?
Negotiate a contract.
Negotiate a contract. So that's why people are hiring you, is to negotiate a contract. Price and terms, that type of thing. So
Make
that's
the contract.
negotiate a contract. So I think there's more to it than create a contract. What would be the better word besides create a contract?
A binding contract.
Yeah, a legally binding contract. So in other words, it's correct. So in other words, if you forget to get initials, if you forget all these things, so get a legally correct contract is what you're responsible for. So one of the most common things people tell me is I'm talking to the seller's agent and I say, well, I complain to them about something. You know what they say to me? The buyer's agent did that. So who's responsible is a legally correct contract?
Both.
Buyer and seller. So you can't say to me, the buyer's agent did that, the seller's agent did that, because you're both responsible for the contract. If it goes to the real estate counsel or a judge, he doesn't say, oh, it's the buyer wrote that. You are responsible for the contract being correct and legally done, right? What else are you responsible for?
Provide right information.
What's one more thing a seller hires you? Yeah, so correct information to buyer and seller, right? So could be a big thing.
Fiduciary?
Provide correct information. That's everything from telling them how old the roof is. If you tell the buyer the roof in this house is 20 years old, when it's only when it's 50 years old, or telling, marketing a property has electric heat when it's natural gas heat, all these things, right? So providing correct information. There's one more thing sellers hire you for. Listing, which basically means marketing. So if you're a seller's agent, they hire you to market the property. So some people would simply put a for sale sign out. Some people would simply put on MLS, not even a for sale sign. Other people will spend thousands of dollars on marketing. So there's a big wide range between signing a listing contract and $10,000 worth of marketing, right? Using drones and everything like that. So those are some things you're responsible for. In my mind, those are the primary things as an agent you'd be responsible for, right? If you think of something else, you can take your thing. But now there's many things that agents become responsible for that I think they're not responsible for. So one of them is the temptation to give legal advice. What's a couple other things?
Cleaning the carpet. I cleaned the carpet yesterday.
Exactly.
My buyer
Cleaning
was
the
so
house.
upset.
Cleaning the house. Okay. Cleaning. That's it. Okay, cleaning. What's something else?
Staging.
Staging. That was the second on my list. Hi, Joe. You can sit there or these two chairs here. Thank you. So, what's something else besides cleaning, staging, and legal advice that you're not responsible for?
Inspecting.
Do an inspection, right? The roof looks good to me. Foundation looks good to me. How about this one? You can put a suite in the basement, no problem, right? So inspection issues. What else? Are you responsible for showing the property to buyers?
Yes.
Not if they have an agent.
No, if you're a seller's agent. Technically not,
Depends what.
right? Because, you see, many of us in this room think that you are, but you think about it in other cities, in BC, the seller's agent never goes to the property after it listing is signed, right? It's 100% on lockbox, 100%, right? So, or some people call me and say this question, they're the buyer's agent and the seller is there opening the door and they go, can the seller open the door? And I go, yeah, right? Can the seller do an open house? I got this question last week, can the seller do an open house? Yeah, why not?
Yes, I can.
Why? Seller can do an open house, right? Unlicensed person, like you, what an agent or office did is they hired their buddy to do the open house, right? That's a license suspension thing, right? You can't hire your buddy to do an open house, but the seller can do the open house, right? They can. And the seller can open the door for a buyer or a buyer's agent, right? So so you're technically not responsible for showing a property, but almost all of you do show the property, right? So there's a difference between what you're required to do and what you do. Anything else that a lot of agents do that they shouldn't do?
Deliver the keys on the completion day.
So that's a debatable thing. You have to make, I would think that you have to make the keys available, and so how you make them available is that everybody does things, how they make them available. That's a hard one to put down where that's responsible for. Showing a property.
Reading documents.
Yeah, so reading the strata documents is another one where people want to tell you, is this a good condo to buy, whatever? You can't really tell them that answer. Is this a good condo? Because it's a subjective thing, right? So you have to be very careful about reading the strata documents.
Like, what do you say regarding strata documents? Like what it says?
Sort of depends on the type of customer you're dealing with and their sophistication level. But I didn't see any signs of any upcoming assessments.
This is all the time you say that?
Well, it depends on the sophistication level, because some people would know what that means, some people wouldn't. And it depends on their level of English as well, if they can read the documents.
It was more related with they do expect you to read, okay? So do you give them the documents and say, I'm going to send you these documents, please let me know if you have any questions? Like how do you do that?
That's exactly what I say,
Okay.
yeah.
They usually ask what
about the
details.
showing on property.
They
So
usually ask
I've
what
been told that
details
as a
you
seller's agent, if I let somebody
pretty
else in
obvious.
and then something gets stolen, I've been told that it's a seller's agent's responsibility to just make sure that everything's kept safe and then nothing's gonna get stolen. If something gets stolen, I've heard it's my responsibility as a seller's agent.
To some extent, that is true. Yeah. So we've got an insurance policy, I think it covers, remember if it's $500 to $1,500 of theft, right? So,
Then tell me when my computer was stolen.
no, from a customer's house. If you do an
Oh.
open house, we've got
I
that.
did. My computer was stolen.
Yeah,
Not
you know what our
theirs.
deductible is? 1,000.
1,000 was my computer.
Exactly. But so we've had that before. So that's why I don't let people wonder. Like if a couple comes in, and the husband goes up there and the wife goes down there, I says no, you have to stay together if the house is occupied. Because we've had a few people dig in drawers and steal cameras and all kinds of things, steal iPads, had that type of thing happen. So I don't let people wander around, right? Yeah, they have to stay together.
What if it's multiple people's?
Yeah, so that's a debatable thing, and so you can keep people outside and just keep the door locked. It depends on what the house is like, right? But yeah, to some extent, you are responsible for the stuff in the house. I'm not sure the legal definition of that, but yeah, there's some responsibility there. You're also responsible, another thing you're responsible for is the safety of the people showing the place, you know, so like when you've got decks that are falling down, stairs that are rotten, you're supposed to not let people go up there. You're supposed to put barriers so people don't walk up and down the stairs and fall down, right? So you're sort of responsible for safety of contents and people looking at the property. Right?
I had an elderly guy, he went down the crawl space,
Yeah,
and I heard a big crash. He
Oh,
broke his
wow.
collarbone.
there you go.
And I told him from now on, don't go into the crawl space.
Yeah. Another common one that realtors hire is movers,
Oh.
right? Movers is another one, right? So I remember many years ago I hired my last mover because the people wanted me to get the mover, so I got them the mover, and of course the mover was late. And so when the mover's late, who do they call?
You.
Call you.
Call me.
You're
Right?
the mover.
I'm the mover, right? Because I hired the mover, right? So if you don't hire the mover, then you don't get that upset call. Because when the mover doesn't show up, they're upset with you, just like I sent a contractor to a friend, and when the contractor didn't show up, who'd they contact? Contact me, right? Same thing when the movers. When the movers didn't show up many years ago, the customer's all upset with me. So I'll never hire a mover again because then the customer doesn't get upset with me, right? Because you're not responsible, hire the mover. Or the cleaning, this type of thing, right?
Same thing with the inspector. They might like come back and do if something, if you referred them.
Yeah, so what does the real estate council want you to do then?
Why?
Give them 3 and say you choose. You
Exactly.
contact yourself.
Exactly.
I don't wanna. Even the mortgage broker. I said, can you tell that? No, you two connect. I did it yesterday.
Yeah, exactly,
You two
because of the
connect.
risk that they get upset with the inspector you chose, or the mortgage broker you chose, or whatever, right?
I still have a question.
Yes.
Who is responsible between remove subjects to possession if damage was done in the house, like it was a leak in the bathroom?
Contract purchase and sale, Megan. So who knows the answer to that question? Subjects removed before possession, the bathroom leaks and does damage.
Seller.
I think seller, but how you can enforce that? I know it's seller, but how you can enforce that as a buyer's agent?
Well, there's a clause in the contract that covers that. Go down farther. Right farther down. Right there. Number 8. The property and all included items will be in substantially the same condition at possession date as when viewed by the buyer on. So if there wasn't a water leak in the ceiling when they saw it on February 3rd, but it's there in possession, then it's different. So then the seller's got to be responsible for that.
How you can enforce that?
Well, you just hire a lawyer and sue them, right? No, that's the answer, right? If they don't agree, that's why it's much easier to get an agreement. Call them up and say, Bill, their big water stain on the ceiling wasn't there when we came to do this, looked at the house. Yeah, they flooded the bathtub. Okay, we need someone to come in there and fix that. I don't wanna do it. Okay, we have to hire a lawyer.
Could you put something on title if you had enough time and it was a big enough issue?
Yeah, like you can do those type, well, because you're the buyer, it's different. But yeah, so it's the easiest solution in every situation is to get people to agree. And if people don't agree, then they have to hire a lawyer. Right? Just like we just had, we were talking about buyer agency last week, so this week, agent in our office called up the buyer who had sold with them, and then they're buying, they signed a buyer agency contract, and they said, oh yeah, we bought something else yesterday. Right, so then of course our buyer's agent is all upset, but they signed a buyer agency contract. So she wants us to somehow collect the money from the customer, but we can't, right? So if the buyer / seller doesn't agree to pay her money for all the work she did showing properties, then option is hire a lawyer and sue the person, right? But it's always easier to reach an agreement, because we've had several agents that's happened to just reach an agreement with the customer, got money. Okay. So now we're going to talk about situations that people had. Okay, so those are the primary things that come to my mind where agents, so you think about the time that agents spend on these things, particularly it takes you time that distracts you from your job of selling real estate. These things distract you. So,
Question, are we responsible to go to the city and find out laneway housing, how much if it's a character house or whatever?
well, it depends if it's gonna impact the sale.
It will, definitely.
Like a Heritage Bee House can't be
Yeah.
destroyed, right? So, yeah, so that's why one of the questions on the PDS is this is a heritage house, it's on there, right? So if the seller, so if example is, because we're gonna talk about that, same thing, you're in this old house and it's, wow, it's amazing. And the question on the PDS is heritage house, remember it's at the bottom down there? Does everyone know what I'm talking about? Heritage house, the seller says no, and you look around and think, this to me seems like a heritage house, but the seller said no, yes, seller, heritage house, no. So then, the real estate council says a reasonably prudent agent would make a further inquiry, because it doesn't make sense, this old house seems like a heritage house, seller says no, so you can go to city, and then you make a second inquiry, because what you have in front of you doesn't make sense. So, that's what it is, so let's go to our contract, the emails. So this is the first one. So Glenn, if an agent had no time to investigate the defects in the house, offers on Monday evening, the buyer and the agent view the house Monday afternoon, is the agent responsible for the transaction? So in other words, it was a rush transaction. They see the property, a couple hours later they do the offer. Because it was a rush transaction, is the agent still responsible for the transaction? That's the question.
Yes, of course.
What do you mean? Is the
Well,
agent
oh,
responsible?
because the buyer is planning to sue the buyer's agent, right? So she is the buyer's agent, and so she's asking if she's responsible for the transaction.
Of course.
Depends if she's put the clause right, subject free and.
Did they remove the subject?
Completed, yes.
They
No,
remove
the answer to this question is, like, some of you are saying no, 100% is yes. 100% is yes, right? So whether you've got time, because the issue is, they had no time to investigate things. So the issue is, it doesn't matter whether you write the contract in 5 minutes or over the next 3 weeks, you're legally responsible for the contract. Like remember, that's one of the things you're responsible for, was the legally contract that we talked about. So, because one of the things this agent wants to say is, because I was rushed to write the contract, I'm not responsible for what was on the contract.
Oh.
But that's not true, right? Because you're responsible for the contract. So the buyer says, I don't have time to get my mortgage approved, well, I have to put down, doesn't matter, they still have to put down subject to financing or waive it. I don't have time to do inspection, well, you have to put down subject to inspection or waive it, right? But you just can't say I don't have time and somehow waive your responsibility, right? So that's very important.
So was the subject free offer then? This particular one?
Yeah. So that is a classic case, because that property was in Coquitlam, and the buyer walks in and it's got 3 suites in the house.
Illegal suites.
What's the chance that a house in Coquitlam has 3 legal suites?
0.
0, 0, 0, right? There's no chance it ever does. So you have to tell yourself, this house has got 3 suites. The chance of it being legal is almost 0. Is 0. Like, Coquitlam doesn't have 3 legal suites in a house. So that's that you have to address that issue, right? And so of course, after the buyer moves in, city writes in a letter, all these types of things, wants them to take out the suite system and everything, so the buyer's upset, right? So that's why you have to think, while you're doing things, if it makes sense, right?
But that wouldn't be a latent defect.
Well, she's using the wrong word, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, technically, material latent defect is what it is, because work done without permits, material latent
Okay.
defect, yeah. Just using the wrong words. So just be very careful of what you're doing, and speed does not matter, because you're responsible. And some people also, there's another funny thing, is some people think because it's a small transaction, I'm only getting $2,000 on this transaction, they're not as responsible in this transaction if they're getting 20,000, right? So whether you get 2,000 or 20,000, your legal responsibility is the same. And whether you're doing in a couple hours like this agent is, or write the contract in 2 weeks, your responsibility stays the same. So very important to remember that.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
On the PDS, would it say like there's unauthorized suite, and if
The agent didn't ask for the PDS, so the buyer didn't get the PDS. So we're gonna come to that. So she wrote, no subject then, we saw this house, has a good rental income. Why did it have a good rental income? 3 suites, right? So we bought it. Now the buyer's got a ticket from the city and need to change it back. The buyers want the agent to cover the cost.
Wow.
I would.
Oh, to take out
The $2,000 commission cover the cost?
Oh, yes.
Yikes.
Right? So, because when you write an offer, what's the basic things you should get when you write an offer? Someone says, I wanna buy that house over there, you call the seller's agent, ask for
Yes,
P-
title search.
PDS and title search. She didn't do that. Because on the PDS, it likely said that, and we don't know, we don't have it. But, right? So very, very, very significant there. So, but it's also the seller's agent's responsibility, because if the seller puts on the PDS, illegal suite, which likely did, I don't know, then it's your job as a seller's agent to make sure the buyer knows there's illegal suites in the house, right? So the seller's agent could have made a mistake not giving that to the buyer if it was noted illegal suites, right? Because the seller makes a disclosure to the buyer, you have to make sure the buyer gets that disclosure. So I'm not sure what the PDS said. So, yeah, we've had several agents come into expensive costs. So this is one, I'm not sure how much that's gonna cost them, but it's gonna cost them some money. Keep going. Okay, well this is just a random one. So, I'll make this smaller. So the question is it legal to sell this property? That's the kitchen. Can you legally sell that property as a realtor?
Yeah.
Yes.
You can. So,
Nothing wrong.
Foreclosure?
it's tenanted. The tenant cooks out of that thing there.
Ooh, Caesars.
Yeah. So the question is,
The milk is bad.
what do you tell that seller?
As it is.
As is, very.
As is.
Correct, because what some agents want to do is they want to help the seller
To fix it.
fix that. But you know what the seller said in the email? That's hopefully my new listing. The seller said, I can't remember the exact words, but the seller said, the strata is doing some assessments and it's put me in a difficult financial position. And I'm doing some renovations and I'm not sure if I should finish them or not. That was the email I got, because they're out of town sellers, right? So, difficult financial position, doing some renovations, not sure if I should finish them or not. So I get there, and that's what I see, right? Tenanted like that. So what does that mean? How much money does the seller have?
Zero.
Zero.
Seller has zero, right? They can't, when they say difficult financial position, that means they haven't paid the strata fees for the special levy, whatever it is, and they don't have money to finish the kitchen, right? So I can't, if I tell the seller, you gotta finish the kitchen before you list it, what are they gonna say?
No.
No.
They're gonna call Camellia, right? So you have to list the property as is.
Committee is so good at fixing things. You're.
Next one.
You can get a contractor going in there and say, I'll fix it, and then you'll pay me.
Exactly. You could. A few agents have done that where you get contracting there at $10,000, so your commission is 7 and 2.5 plus 10,000. But I'm not going to bother. This is a long story. Okay, so we're going to come back to this one. This is title search things. Okay, I want to skip that one. I want to go to the next one. Okay, so let's talk about. Okay, so let's just stop for a second. Let's talk about the next one. So we've had. So you list a property, and the buyer's agent texts you and says, "Are pets allowed?" You reply back saying, "Yes, pets are allowed." Any restrictions? No restrictions. So, buyer doesn't remove subjects without getting the bylaws. Buyer gets the bylaws a couple weeks later, reads in the bylaws, no vicious dogs. They've got 2 pit bulls. So the buyer doesn't want to complete. This is happening this week. So, did the buyer's agent or seller's agent do any mistakes there?
Both. Yeah, they should
He
read.
did not.
Didn't have the bylaws.
They shouldn't remove subjects before they'll get the bylaws, because you have subject to documents.
Right, and they trusted